stand against hate. I stand against racism. I stand against anti-Semitism. And I hate that that line was stuck in there. That's accountability. So when we're asking you these questions and you're ducking and you're not answering them directly, that's not a culture of a war. What was the term? A war ethos, a warrior ethos.
What comes next will shock you. And yes, we've got more live footage of that in a second. Consider the staggering reality of allocating $45 million, not towards housing for military familiars or care for veterans, but instead on a lavish parade, a spectacle, while our troops reside in deteriorating barracks. This is precisely what Pete Hegseth has stood by, and Representative Wesley Bell was quick to challenge at this misplaced priority. It raises a critical question about our values and how we choose to honor those who serve. Investing in the well-being of our military personnel shall take precedence over extravagant displays, ensuring that they have the basic necessities and support they deserve.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell.
Mr. Secretary, unlike my colleague down the dais, I don't feel sorry for you. I visited with soldiers in war zones whose life is on the line, so a few tough questions. I think you'll be okay. And so my first question is, are you authorized to disclose intelligence that would put our troops in harm's way to our enemies?
Well, I reject the premise of the question.
Just as a hypothetical, are you authorized to do that?
I have not and do not.
Exactly, and I assume that. So when you told our ranking member that everything that you say is authorized, that wasn't completely accurate, correct?
What I said is that every way that I communicate is authorized.
No, you actually said everything that you said is authorized. I wrote it down. Now, with that said, and the reason I bring that up is because it's about accountability. And we're talking about this war ethos. The primary component of that is accountability. And I'm going to indulge me in a quick analogy. Republicans introduced a bill on the House floor a few days ago, a resolution standing against terror, racism, hate, anti-Semitism, which as an African, as an American, as a black man, I'm going to stand against those things 6 times a week, twice on Sunday. Now, the nefarious part was there was a line that was stuck at the end of that resolution that essentially gave a shout out to law enforcement, which I do support, but also to ICE, which right now, a lot of Americans have a problem with the way ICE is being deployed. And I'm not happy with what they're doing, nor do I want to shout them out for that. And so accountability was, I didn't duck from the question. I went and I talked to my constituents. I went on social media. I did interviews to explain exactly where I stood, that I stand against hate. I stand against racism. I stand against anti-Semitism. And I hate that that line was stuck in there. That's accountability. So when we're asking you these questions and you're ducking and you're not answering them directly, that's not a culture of a war. What was the term? A war ethos, a warrior ethos. I'm looking at members who serve, and they're taking their lead from you. That starts with you. And if we have troops who are in war zones and they're watching while they're risking their lives, and you can't just answer some tough questions, what kind of culture is that setting? So, as a prosecutor, when I think about what's happening in California and around the country with ICE, it's not only dangerous and unconstitutional, but it raises serious public safety concerns because we have people with masks that are going around saying that they're ICE, and we've had reports of that, saying that they're ICE and committing crimes. And that's a big problem. But it gets me back to the point of the accountability piece. So, for example, do you believe quality military housing is important? Yes or no? And just keep your mic on for time because I don't only have a minute left.
Our budget commits to robust military housing and barracks.
Do you believe military children deserve a strong education?
Our budget funds strong education, and we hope more educational choices for military.
Love it. Is it a priority to provide real, reliable care to our veterans?
Of course.
So, Mr. Secretary, we have a problem here because your answers don't match your budget priorities. You said your mission is to restore this warrior ethos, and that threats we face are serious, but so must our investments. So when we think of, for example, a $45 million parade, I can think of 45 million things we could do more effectively with $45 million than a parade, such as the things that I mentioned: military housing, military children's education, providing reliable care for our veterans. All of these things would be higher on the priority than a parade. And so the parade, and when we talk about showing strength, we're not talking about theater. We're not talking about showmanship. We're talking about things that actually make our military more lethal and keeps us safer. And so what I'm saying is that in my limited time left is accountability does matter, and this body cares about what our military is doing, because we care about national security, and we all take it very seriously.
Gentleman's time is expired.
But what came next cut deeper than anyone expected. A moment that exposed the real priorities behind the patriotic slogans. This moment wasn't about trimming decimals in a spreadsheet. It was about values, about what we choose to honor. When no one's cheering and the cameras aren't rolling, Congressman Wesley Bell stepped into that hearing. Not to trade slogans, but to force a reckoning. If soldiers can't duck accountability on the battlefield, then a defense secretary nominee doesn't get to duck it in a hearing. Bell started with the basics, the human basics. He reminded the room that real readiness doesn't begin with parades, it begins with people, with the private staring down a second deployment, while his kids' school on base struggles to keep a full-time math teacher, with the sergeant living in a barracks room where the HVAC dies every August and the ceiling leaks every March, with the young family commuting 40 minutes, because base housing is wait-listed into next year. That's the reality, Bell said. That is the daily grind that never makes it into glossy recruitment ads. Then he pivoted to Pete Hegseth, direct, steady, and blinking. Let's talk about priorities, Bell said. Not the press releases, the actual choices. And in the silence that followed, he laid out the headline number, $45 million. Not for live fire training ranges, not for night vision upgrades, cyber readiness. Not for live fire training ranges, cyber readiness. $45 million for a military parade. Pageantry, optics, a one-day spectacle. To make a point that could be made with a single sentence, we support our troops. Bell didn't raise his voice, he didn't have to. He let the contrast speak. $45 million could replace uninhabitable rooms. Hire counselors for the mental health clinics. That book out for months, expand child care slots. So service members can actually report for duty without begging neighbors for help. $45 million could keep promises quietly, humbly, effectively, or it can fund a parade. Which one? Bell asked. Looks more like leadership to the people who wear the uniform. Hegseth tried the familiar root talking points about warrior ethos, the honor of service, the symbolism of national pride. Bell didn't swipe at the symbolism. He honored it and then pushed past it. Symbolism without substance, he said, is a costume. The warrior ethos doesn't live in a flyover. It lives in a barracks room that isn't black molded. In a school with enough teachers, in gear that doesn't fail when it counts. You don't prove strength with a parade. You prove it by taking care of your people when the parade is over. To ground it, Bell reached for the frontline realities. Combat zone logistics, casualty evacuation timelines. The unglamorous math of spare parts and maintenance hours. He laid out how readiness is built. In schedules and training cycles, in technicians who don't leave. Because they can't afford to stay, in families who can survive the 14th PCS move without losing their savings or their sanity. If you want a military that can outthink, outmove, and outlast, you invest in the everyday, because the everyday is what wins tomorrow. Then Bell widened the lens. Accountability, he said, isn't just a military word, it's a governing word. That's why he drew a line to the ICE abuses. He'd flagged masked individuals impersonating ICE agents, using fear as leverage, exploiting the chaos of broken systems. These aren't abstract headlines, they're human ruptures. Bell's point was simple and devastating. When leaders tolerate fog, people get hurt. Whether it's a sham agent at a front door or a sham priority in the federal budget. Deception carries a cost that somebody else pays, and too often, it's the people with the least power. The soldier's family, the immigrant family, who absorbed the blow. Back to the days. Bell moved into yes or no territory. The kind that exposes whether principles can survive contact with specifics. Do you support quality military housing? Do military children deserve a strong education? Of course. Should we prioritize care for veterans? Absolutely. Bell nodded and pulled, the thread everyone could see. Then why, he asked, does this budget elevate a parade over the basics? Why does the ledger say spectacle before it says shelter, schools, and care? The answers didn't come, not because there weren't words to say, but because the numbers had already been spoken. Budgets are moral documents. They show what we truly believe, not what we wish we believed. Hegseth tried to recast the parade as a unifier. A morale boost, a nationally televised salute. Bell didn't knock the salute. He questioned the arithmetic. If morale is the goal, fund what troops and families say lifts it. Predictable schedules, safe housing, stable schools, strong clinics. And a path that doesn't punish spouses for moving every 2 years. If unity is the goal, honor the oath we all claim to the Constitution, not to a political storyline. The parade isn't the point. The people are. And Bell did what the best oversight does. He tied the themes together. Readiness, accountability, and truth. Readiness collapses without honest math. Accountability collapses without honest answers. And truth collapses when leaders treat governance like a continuous campaign where image outruns substance. Where a choreographed event substitutes for a funded plan. Soldiers, Bell said, don't get to spin reality. If we're going to ask for that kind of courage from them, we owe them courage here. The courage to choose care over spectacle. Maintenance over vanity. The mission over the moment. He painted the scene we never see on parade day. The staff duty NCO walking past a housing office with a line out the door.